Picture a greenhouse, an ordinary glass greenhouse, the kind a gardener would use for forcing tomatoes. Now lift it 4 stories into the air and bolt it to the roof of a building in the middle of the busiest shopping street on earth. Fill it with poison, ether that catches fire if a candle comes within a yard of it, cyanide enough to kill everyone in the building twice over, silver solutions that stain skin black for weeks, acid that eats through fingernails, and a wooden machine with an iron claw that holds human heads perfectly still, whether they like it or not. Add a procession of dukes, drapers, brides, murderers awaiting trial, and dead children in their best clothes, all climbing the same 4 flights of stairs to sit in front of the same brass-bound box. That's a London photographic studio in 1862, the most modern place in the world and one of the most dangerous. A miracle of science that smells like a hospital and works like a small chemical factory. A place where you could photograph a countess at 10 in the morning and a corpse by 4 in the afternoon and get paid better for the corpse. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists flipping through an album of stiff, unsmiling faces, wondering why everyone in the 19th century looks like they're at a funeral. We're going to find out why. We're living it. 1 year, 1 person. Everything they would have seen, smelled, held, breathed, and survived. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who like hearing about cyanide baths and corpse portraits. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. For a moment, maybe half a second, you've forgotten where you are. Then it hits you. The smell. It's not just one smell, it's layers. Ether first, sweet and cold, like a hospital corridor drifting up through the floorboards from the darkroom 2 floors below, where it seeps out of the collodion bottles no matter how tightly you stopper them. Then ammonia, sharp enough to make your eyes water, from the cleaning trays you scrubbed last night. Then something faintly rotten underneath, which is the Thames and the horse dung of Regent Street, and the smoke of 500,000 coal fires, all mixed together into the ordinary breath of London, and underneath it all the smell of your own body, which has not been properly washed in 9 days, wrapped in a blanket that has not been washed in considerably longer. Welcome to London in April 1862. And there is a problem, and the problem arrives in your chest before you're even fully awake. The silver bath. Last night, past 11, dead on your feet, you filtered the silver bath through paper and poured it back into its stoneware tank, or you think you did. You remember lifting the funnel. You do not remember stoppering the tank. And if you left the tank open overnight, dust has settled into 30 ounces of silver nitrate solution, and every photograph taken today will come out diseased with black specks, and Mr. Marlowe will know exactly whose hands touched the bath last. An open tank, that's all it takes. 30 ounces of silver, worth more than you earn in 3 months, ruined by dust you can't even see. You lie there in the dark with your heart going and do the arithmetic of your own destruction, which is a thing you've learned to do quickly since you came to this city. You're lying on a straw mattress in an attic room above the finest photographic studio you have ever seen, at number 148 Regent Street, the most fashionable shopping street in London, which as far as you can tell means the most fashionable shopping street anywhere. 4 floors below you, behind plate glass, hang framed portraits of people so beautifully dressed that on your first day you assumed they were royalty. Some of them were. Your name is William Ansell. You're 16 years old, and you arrived here 5 weeks ago from a village outside Norwich with exactly one letter of introduction from your uncle, one change of linen, and your dead father's Sunday boots, which are a size too large, and have been raising a blister on your left heel ever since. Back home, everyone said London would swallow you whole. They weren't wrong, they just didn't mention that it would do it slowly, one small terror at a time. Across the attic on the other cot, Thomas Gage is still asleep. Thomas is 19, the senior assistant 3 years into the trade, and he sleeps like a man with no sins and no silver bath on his conscience, flat on his back with his mouth open. Thomas is from Deptford and knows everything. Which suppliers water their chemicals, which sitters will tip, how to tell, from the sound of feet on the stairs, whether the person coming up is a customer or a creditor. At least he doesn't snore much. You share this attic with him. A washstand, a cracked basin, and a single candle you're strictly forbidden to light anywhere near your working clothes, because your working clothes are spotted with collodion, and collodion is made from gun cotton, and gun cotton is called gun cotton for a reason. Yeah, your clothes could technically catch fire off a spark. That's normal. Every photographic assistant in London walks around lightly dusted with explosive. Nobody at your level can afford a second set of working clothes to change into. You learn to stand well back from lamps. The church bells are already going. Not just one church. Dozens. Overlapping, near and far, the sound rolling over the rooftops the way it has every morning for centuries. All Souls is closest, John Nash's odd round church at the top of Regent Street with its sharpened pencil spire built in 1824, mocked in Parliament when it went up and mocked ever since. Its bell has a flat, business-like clang, and it is telling you it is 6 o'clock, and that you are already, in the private court of Mr. Marlowe's opinion, running late. You need to get up. You need to get down 2 flights of stairs and into the darkroom and look at that tank before Mr. Marlowe does. The floorboards are cold under your bare feet, cold enough to make you hiss through your teeth. You dress in the dark, quickly, by feel. A rough flannel shirt, stiff at the cuffs where chemicals have dried. Wool trousers with a permanent black stain down the right thigh, exactly where you wipe your hand without thinking. A stain every assistant in London wears in exactly the same place, like a regimental badge. Waistcoat. Your father's boots, cold as coffins. The blister objects. You ignore it. Your one bit of pride hangs on the nail by the door. A black silk neckcloth, second-hand but real silk, which cost you a week's pocket money in Petticoat Lane. It marks you as an assistant in a Regent Street house, rather than a boy who sweeps crossings. Appearances matter in this city. They matter more than almost anything, and nowhere on earth do they matter more than in a building whose entire business is appearances. You go down the attic stairs, then the back stairs, moving quietly past the second-floor landing where Mr. and Mrs. Marlowe sleep, and you can feel your own pulse in your throat, and you are thinking, please, please let it be stoppered. The darkroom is at the back of the first floor, behind a door painted black, with a curtain behind the door and a second curtain behind that, because light is the enemy, and light is patient, and light will find any gap you leave it. You go through both curtains into the familiar red-brown gloom. The smell in here is a solid thing. Ether and alcohol and the sharp metallic tang of silver. A smell that has already soaked so deep into your skin that a pew of chapel-goers back home would probably take you for some sort of foreign chemist. The tank sits on its shelf above the sink, stoppered. The glass cap seated, the cloth cover folded over it, exactly as Mr. Marlowe requires, exactly as you were taught. exactly as your own tired hands apparently did it last night without telling you. Relief goes through you like warm water. You stand there a moment in the red dark, one hand on the cold stoneware, and you let yourself breathe. 30 ounces of silver, safe. Your place in this house, safe, for today. That is what nobody tells you about this trade. Everyone imagines the photographer's life is about light and faces and art. It is actually about vigilance. It is about 40 small rituals performed in the correct order every day, any one of which, skipped or fumbled, quietly destroys something expensive. The plate remembers everything. That's the first thing Thomas told you, your first morning, and you thought he was being poetic. He was not being poetic. The plate remembers everything. Every speck of dust, every fingerprint, every tremor, every shortcut. It is the most honest witness in London. And in an hour, the first sitters of the day will begin climbing the stairs in their best clothes to sit in front of that honest witness and be remembered forever. Not one of them will smile. You know this already, 5 weeks in, the way you know the sun rises. Nobody smiles. Not the brides, not the young officers, not the children. God help them. And this morning, as you begin to lay out the trays and measure the developer, you could not yet explain all the reasons why. By tonight, a year from tonight, you will be able to explain every one of them. Here we go. By 6:30 you have the darkroom breathing properly, trays rinsed, developer mixed fresh, iron sulfate and acetic acid, measured with the little glass measure, because guessing is for men who can afford to ruin plates. Fixing bath checked. The fixing bath is cyanide of potassium dissolved in water, and it sits in its tray looking exactly like water, clear and innocent, and it would kill you in minutes if you were fool enough to drink it, and it would kill you in hours through an open cut on your hand if you were fool enough to have one. You have learned to check your hands every morning the way a sailor checks the sky. This morning, one hangnail, left thumb. You'll keep the left hand out of the trays today, and you note it the way you'd note the weather. Then up the back stairs with the water cans, 2 of them. Filled from the tap in the yard, £30 each, 4 flights, because the studio at the top of the house drinks water all day, and the water does not walk up by itself. Your shoulders have changed shape in 5 weeks. Your mother would notice. Your mother would also notice the black stains on your fingers, which no soap in England will remove, because silver nitrate does not wash off. It wears off, taking a layer of you with it. By the time you get to the top floor, Mr. Marlowe is already in the glasshouse, standing in the middle of the grey morning light with his watch open in his palm, doing what he does every morning, which is nothing you can name. Reading the light, tasting it almost. Septimus Marlowe is 53 years old, a spare, upright man with grey whiskers cut close, a black coat that is older than you and better kept than you, and surprisingly gentle hands. Those hands can settle a shrieking 2-year-old, tilt a duchess's chin 1 inch without offence, and close a dead man's eyes so softly the family doesn't see it happen. He was taking likenesses when photography was 1 year old. He'll tell you, if you catch him in the right mood, which comes perhaps once a season, that he stood in Richard Beard's studio at the Royal Polytechnic Institution in March 1841, the first portrait studio in Europe, a glass cage on a roof just like this one, and watched grown men queue 4 hours and pay a guinea each to sit for a single small daguerreotype, in the days when a portrait took a minute or more of frozen stillness in blue-tinted light, and sitters came out with their streaming from staring. calling it the most wonderful thing they had ever endured. "You're late," he says, without looking up from the watch. "You're not late." He says this every morning. You've learned not to argue. It is not really an accusation. It is a tuning note, the tap of a conductor's baton. The day now officially exists. "Sky," he says. "High cloud, sir. Even light might thicken by noon." He nods once, which from Mr. Marlowe is a banquet of praise, and snaps the watch shut. And when I say the studio is a glass house, I need you to understand what that means in 1862, because there is no electric light anywhere in the world, and there is no flash powder yet worth the name, and gaslight is useless for photography, brilliant as it looks to the eye. The chemistry sees light differently than you do. It gorges on daylight, on the blue in daylight, and it turns its nose up at almost everything else, which means every photograph in this city is made by the sun or not at all. So photographers have climbed the rooftops, all down Regent Street and Oxford Street, above the milliners and glovers. The roofline has sprouted these strange crystal boxes, and in them all day London sits to be remembered. Marlowe's glass house runs 32 feet long by 15 wide, ridge roof. The north-facing slope all glass. The south slope slated because north light is steady light. The same reason painters have wanted north windows for 400 years. Along the glass run calico blinds on cords, and a system of movable screens, and one section of panes tinted pale blue, which softens the glare on the sitter's face and, more to the point, lets them hold their eyes open without weeping. One of those blue panes, third from the end, is cracked corner to corner and patched with a strip of oiled paper, and it has been cracked since before you arrived. Mr. Marlowe looks at it sometimes. Then he looks at the ledger. Then the pane stays cracked. Glass of that tint must be ordered specially and costs 11 shillings, and 11 shillings is 12 dozen eggs or a week of a workman's wages, and the paper, he says, serves. When it rains hard, the paper darkens and bellies like a little sail, and you have learned to angle the sitter's chair so the drip, when it comes, lands on the floorboards and not on the velvet. At one end of the room stands the camera on its wheeled stand, a mahogany and brass box square-shouldered, with a Petzval-type portrait lens whose great glass eye cost Mr. Marlowe more than every other object in the room together. At the other end, the sitter's territory, a carved chair, a papier-mâché table for the sitter's hand to rest on, a painted canvas backdrop of a vague palatial nowhere, a rolled carpet, a plaster column that weighs nothing and has held up nothing in its life, and the stand. You want to know why nobody smiled in these photographs? Start here, with a piece of furniture nobody in the finished picture is ever supposed to notice. An iron pillar on a heavy trefoil base, adjustable for height, and at the top of it, a pair of curved iron arms, padded shaped to receive the back of a human skull. The headrest, the posing stand. Sitters call it other things. The thing is screwed until the armour just cradle the head, and then the head cannot drift, cannot nod, cannot tremble for as long as the lens is open. In the finished portrait you'll sometimes catch its trefoil foot peeping out behind a gentleman's heels like the foot of a small iron ghost. Marlowe's headrest is older than the carte de visite itself, and the upper thumb screw, the one that locks the height, is cracked through its wing. It holds if you seat it with exactly the right firmness and stop at exactly the right moment. Tighten a hair past that and it slips, and the whole top section drops an inch with a clank like a dropped fire iron, which in a quiet studio sounds like the end of the world. You have asked Thomas why Mr. Marlowe doesn't replace a fitting that costs a few shillings. Thomas looked at you with pity. Same reason the blue pane's got paper on it. He came up in the hungry years of this trade. Man watched half the daguerreotypists in London go bankrupt by 55. He'd sooner trust a cracked screwy nose than a sound one he doesn't. Just don't you over-tighten it. Below the glass house, on the first floor, is the reception room, and the reception room is a different country. Turkey carpet, crimson curtains, a table with albums bound in Morocco leather, and the price list in a silver frame, engraved, not printed because print is for tradesmen. Carte de visite, 1 guinea the dozen, a guinea. 21 shillings for 12 small photographs pasted on cards, in a city where the maid who dusts that silver frame earns perhaps £12 in a year. A single cabinet portrait, larger, from 15 shillings, coloured by hand, extra. Ivory miniature finish, considerably extra. Nobody who climbs these stairs is poor, and the ones who are poor and climb them anyway have decided that being remembered is worth more than eating well this month, and you have already seen that decision walk in wearing its only good dress, and you will see it again. Mrs. Marlowe is in the reception room now, winding the clock. Eliza Marlowe, 20 years younger than her husband, in grey silk, with a face that misses nothing, and hands roughened at the fingertips in a particular way you didn't understand until you saw her work. It is Mrs. Marlowe who keeps the appointment book, Mrs. Marlowe who prices the extras, Mrs. Marlowe who can tell from the street door closing whether the person coming up will spend 1 guinea or 5. And it is Mrs. Marlowe who sits at the north window of the parlour every afternoon with a sable brush that comes to a point of 3 hairs, laying watercolour onto albumen prints, a breath of rose into a cheek, gilt onto a button, blue into a dead man's waistcoat, so faint and so exact that the family will swear the photograph was always coloured, that he was always that alive. "The book's full till 2, she says, not looking up from the clock. Mrs. Prideaux at 9 with the daughters, then a naval gentleman, then the alderman's clerk about the alderman. A pause, and she sets the clock's hands with one finger gently. And at 4, a lady I've put down for a private sitting. You'll keep the stair clear at 4, William. You say yes, ma'am, and you don't ask. You have learned that too. A private sitting at the dead end of the day, the stair kept clear, the street door watched. 5 weeks in this house, and you already know what comes up the stairs at 4 o'clock, though you have not yet had to help carry it. Breakfast, she says, and it's bread and dripping and tea on the back landing standing up in the 11 minutes before the first bell. You eat all of it. In this house they feed you properly, which is more than half the apprentices in London can say, and you have written home twice to say so, both times leaving out the cyanide. Mrs. Prideaux arrives at 9 with 2 daughters and opinions. She is the wife of a wool merchant with premises in the city, and she's been to a photographer once before in Brighton, and the man in Brighton, she wishes it known, positioned her against a painted balustrade. Mr. Marlowe receives this intelligence with the grave bow of a man being told about a foreign war, and steers her toward the carved chair. You watch from beside the camera, because your work during a sitting is to be everywhere and to be invisible. You hold the reflecting screen, you fetch, you count. Thomas is already gone behind the black curtain of the little rooftop darkroom closet, coating the first plate, because from this moment the whole morning becomes a race that no one in the room is allowed to look like they're running. Here is the thing nobody outside the trade understands. The wet collodion process, Frederick Scott Archer's process, the process that conquered the world 11 years ago, is called wet for a reason. The plate must be poured, sensitised, exposed, and developed while the chemistry is still damp, and you have perhaps 10 minutes from bath to development before it dries and dies, which means the photograph is not a moment, it is a countdown. From the second the plate leaves the silver bath, everyone upstairs is working against an invisible clock, and the sitter must not know it, because a sitter who feels hurried stiffens like a hare. Mr. Marlowe seats Mrs. Prideaux, turns her shoulders 3 degrees, places her near hand on the papier-mâché table. Just so, fingers softly curled, because splayed fingers photograph like a bundle of parsnips. Arranges the skirt in sculptured folds, with 2 touches of a cane he keeps for the purpose, never his hand. Then he wheels the headrest behind her, and you see her eyes follow the iron arms, and you see what you always see, the small alarm, the polite decision not to remark on it. "A support, madam," Mr. Marlowe says. "Merely a support. You will forget it is there." She will not forget it is there. Nobody forgets it is there. But the arms cradle her skull through the lace cap, and you seat the cracked thumbscrew with your fingertips, the way Thomas taught you, firm and then stop and the iron holds. And now, madam, perfect stillness. The eyes may rest upon the little mark on the column. Do not fix them fiercely. Rest them. A pause. His voice goes lower, slower, almost the voice a man uses to gentle a horse. Think of something quiet, madam. A room you loved. Stillness now. Stillness. He lifts the brass cap off the lens, and the room holds its breath. 1, 2, 3. You count in your head, and you can hear the flat clang of a cart passing 4 stories down, and a fly ticking against the glass roof, and the silence of a woman trying not to exist too loudly. Under this high, even cloud on this April morning, through that lens the plate wants 8 seconds. 8 seconds is nothing on a clock, and 8 seconds is a very long time to be a statue of yourself. 4, 5, watch her hands. If the fingers tremble, the fingers blur. 6. Her nostrils have gone wide with the effort of breathing without moving. 7, 8. The cap goes back on, soft as closing a snuff-box. "Thank you, madam. Admirable." And Mrs. Prideaux comes back to life, and it is like watching a wax figure remember itself, the shoulders dropping, the breath released, the small embarrassed laugh. Now she laughs, now that it can do no harm. Now ask the question you came here to ask. Why not that laugh, 1 minute sooner, inside the photograph? Try it. Try holding a smile, a real one right now, without moving anything for 8 seconds. By 4 seconds the eyes have died and the mouth is still going. By 6 it is not a smile, it is a baring of teeth, a grimace with sugar on it. The chemistry cannot take an instant of you. It takes a duration of you. It takes 8 seconds of your face all pressed into one. And any expression you must sustain turns false in the sustaining. Stillness is the only expression that survives being held. Calm survives. Gravity survives. Everything else curdles. When exposures were a minute, in Mr. Marlowe's Polytechnic days, sitters came out looking carved from soap. 8 seconds is a mercy by comparison, and 8 seconds is still 8 seconds too long for joy. That's the first reason. It is not the last one. Hold that thought, the way Mrs. Prideaux held her breath. The daughters sit next, together, one standing with her hand on the seated one's shoulder, the eternal arrangement. Then the plates go down to the darkroom, And this is where you learn what the trade is actually made of. Because Mrs. Prideaux believes the photograph is made upstairs, in the light. It is made in the dark, in a smell of ether, in 14 fluid motions there is no time to think between. And here is the arithmetic underneath it. Because you have started keeping the studio's numbers in your head, the way you once kept the price of barley for your father. 1 guinea the dozen for carts. Against that, the glass, best flatted crown, perhaps 2p the plate. The collodion, the silver, the developer, the cyanide, the albumen paper from Saxony, the gold chloride for toning. Call it a shilling of chemistry and paper across a dozen prints if nothing is wasted. Coal for the reception fire, rent on a Regent Street corner, which is its own quiet monster. Mrs. Marlowe's ledger knows the figure and you don't, and the wages of 2 assistants at a few shillings a week plus beds and bread. Every plate that fails, every plate poured badly, fogged, cracked, or blinked into ruin, is pure loss, silver down the sink. At 1 guinea the dozen with perhaps 4 sittings a day, this house lives well. The 6-penny men by the river, and you will meet the 6-penny men live on volume or not at all. That difference, multiplied across a year, is the difference between Morocco albums and the workhouse, and everyone in the trade knows a man who has made the whole journey. The naval gentleman comes at 11, a lieutenant wanting carts before his ship leaves for the China station, and he sits like a mast, which is to say beautifully, the trade loves military men. They have been drilled their whole lives for exactly this. Then the alderman's clerk, arranging Thursday for the alderman himself, a man, the clerk confides, of some fullness of figure, who will want the fullness managed. Mr. Marlowe assures him fullness is a speciality of the house. And then, a little before 2, the girl. She's perhaps 19, a draper's daughter from Marylebone, here with her aunt to be photographed for a young man in Canada, an emigrant she's promised to, who has not seen her face in 3 years, and wants, his letter apparently said, to see it before the wedding. She's nervous the way sitters are nervous, which you have learned is the nervousness of church, because that is the only other place in their lives where they wear these clothes and hold this still and feel this watched by eternity. Mr. Marlowe seats her, arranges her, cradles her head in the iron. Perfect stillness, he says. Think of something quiet. He uncaps the lens, and on the count of 5 from the street 4 stories below rises the sudden bray of a costermonger's donkey, an outraged, absurd, magnificent sound, a sound like a pump handle worked by a lunatic, and the girl laughs. Not a titter, a real laugh, caught utterly off guard, her head tipping back against the iron, her shoulders jumping, her whole face opening up like a window flung wide. "Plate's gone," Thomas murmurs, and caps the lens. The aunt is mortified. The girl is redder than the curtains downstairs. Mr. Marlowe is all smoothness. These things occur. We shall simply take another, and Thomas is already moving for a fresh plate, and you carry the spoiled one down to the darkroom to be developed anyway, because Mr. Marlowe develops everything. Waste teaches, he says. Waste is the only tutor who charges nothing further. Alone in the red gloom, you rock the developer over the glass and the image rises out of the whiteness the way images do, like something surfacing in a pond, and there she is. Ruined. Of course. Ruined. The head is a soft blur. Doubled. A ghost of motion. And yet the mouth. The mouth and the eyes have come through, smeared but unmistakable, and they are laughing, and you stand there in the ether smell with a tray rocking in your black-stained hands, and you cannot stop looking at it. 5 weeks you have watched faces rise out of this chemistry. grave faces, composed faces, faces armoured for eternity. This is the first one that looks alive. This is the first one that looks like a person you know rather than a monument to one, like someone about to speak, someone in the middle of a Tuesday, someone real. It is against every rule of the trade, and it is the truest thing the trade has shown you. The rule is that spoiled plates are scrubbed the same day, the glass cleaned with acid and rag and used again, because glass is money. You wash the plate, you varnish it, and then, hearing your own heart in your ears, you do not scrub it. You slide it into the gap behind the loose board at the back of the darkroom's bottom shelf, flat, wrapped in a sheet of blotting paper, where the acid bottles stand in front and nobody reaches. It is the first thing you've ever stolen. It is a picture of a stranger, ruined, worth nothing to anyone on earth. You could not explain to a magistrate or your mother why your hands are shaking. You go back upstairs. The girl sits again. This time there is no donkey, and she holds her stillness like everyone holds their stillness, and the plate is perfect, and the face that will sail to Canada is calm and grave and lovely and closed. A face on a monument, a face for a man to be faithful to. Nobody will ever know you think what her laugh looked like. Nobody except you. After the girl and her aunt have gone, Mr. Marlowe sends you out. The ether is low and the albumen paper is lower, and both live at Mr. Pole's, photographic chemist, in a court off Leicester Square, a 15-minute walk that takes you straight down Regent Street and into the boil of the afternoon. And when I say the street is crowded, I need you to understand what that means in 1862, in the West End of the largest city that has ever existed on the earth. Nearly 3 million people and more arriving on every train. This is not a modern crowd moving in lanes. This is a river with opinions. Broughams and hansom cabs and delivery vans locked axle to axle, 100 yards of them, all stopped because one dray horse has gone down on the wood paving and a man is sitting on its head, which is how you keep a fallen horse from thrashing, while the drivers behind him conduct a review of his ancestry. Crossing sweepers darting between wheels for their pennies. A German band on the corner playing something patriotic at a tobacconist who has not asked for it. Sandwich board men advertising the great international exhibition at South Kensington, opening the 1st of May, the wonder of the age, and shopmen in doorways, and silk dresses 4 feet wide taking their share of pavement, and then a little more, and boys everywhere, carrying everything, hats, fish, letters, bird cages, a mirror that flashes the whole street sideways when its bearer turns. You have learned to move through it the way Thomas taught you. Never stop, never meet the eye of anyone who wants to sell you something. Keep your parcel arm against your ribs and your money, all 1 and 6pence of it in the inside pocket, because the outside pockets of everyone on this street belong, in practice, to the profession that works the crowds. Mr. Pole's shop announces itself by smell before sign, ether and beeswax and something acrid under both. Inside it is a cave of brown glass bottles floor to ceiling, and behind the counter is Mr. Pole himself, a small, wheezing, cheerful man of 60 with half-moon spectacles and hands stained blacker than yours will ever be, the fingers dark to the second knuckle, 30 years of silver in the skin. He was mixing chemicals for daguerreotypists when Mr. Marlowe was young in the trade, and he survived the mercury fumes of those years, which not everyone did, and he will tell you about it whether or not you ask. Marlowe's boy, he says. Ether and the Saxon paper. How's his bath behaving? Filtered sweet, sir. Course it is. He's careful. Careful men bore me and bury me. He wheezes at his own joke, wrapping the bottles in straw. Then he does what he does every visit, because he has decided your education is partly his responsibility. He holds up one black finger. What killed Archer, boy? You know this catechism now. Poverty, sir. Poverty. Man gives the whole world the wet plate in 1851, gives it no patent, no license, free to every soul with a camera, and the whole world says thank you very much, and lets him die in 1857 without 2 coins to rub, and a subscription for his children after. Remember that when you're rich. The finger swings toward the back shelf where the blue-labelled bottles live. And what kills operators? Carelessness, sir. Cyanide, boy. Cyanide through a cut no bigger than a paper's edge, or a splash to the lip, or a fool sucking a stain off his thumb. I could name you 3 men. I'll spare you the names. They've stopped being interesting. He leans over the counter, and behind the spectacles his eyes are suddenly not cheerful at all. You check your hands of a morning? Every morning, sir. Then you'll do. Silver forgives nothing, but it warns you first. That's more than London does. He straightens, cheerful again, and takes your coins, and tells you the ether has gone up 2p the pound since the exhibition started buying. Everything has. And mind the crossing at the circus. A boy was killed there Tuesday week. You mind the crossing at the circus. Back at the house, you find Thomas in the darkroom decanting your ether, and you learn a thing you had somehow not learned in 5 weeks, because you have been too busy learning 40 other things. Under the darkroom sink stands a stoneware jar, 2 gallons, glazed brown, with a wooden lid, and you have taken it for rubbish. Into it, Thomas is pouring the first rinse water from the day's prints, the water that carries silver off the paper, and after it the clipped ends of the silvered sheets and the filter papers from the bath, everything the trade touches and discards. Rubbish jar, you say? Thomas looks at you the way he looked at you about the thumbscrew. That, he says, is the pension. Every drop of wash-water in this house that ever kissed silver goes in there, and the sweepings and the papers. Once a year a refiner comes up from Clerkenwell, takes the lot, burns it down, and pays out for the silver in it. Last year, £11. Year before, 9. There are houses that let it run down the drain, and there are houses that are still in business. Old man's rule. The trade wastes nothing, because the trade was hungry once. He seats the lid with his boot. Touch the sitter's silver. That's theft and jail. But the jar is the house's harvest. Mind you pour into it and never out. £11. Nearly half a year of a housemaid's wages sitting under a sink in dirty water. You look at the brown jar with a new respect, and it seems to you suddenly that this whole house is like that jar, that nothing here is what it looks like, that everything dull in this trade has silver hidden in it somewhere. At 4 o'clock the stair is kept clear. They come up quietly, a man and a woman in good black, the man carrying what looks at first like a long parcel wrapped in a white shawl, carrying it high against his shoulder the way you carry a sleeping child, and that is what it is, except for the sleeping. Their names are not entered in the book. Mrs. Marlowe receives them at the landing with a gentleness you have not seen her spend on countesses, and Mr. Marlowe himself takes them up, and you are sent for the small wicker chair, and then sent out. You are sent out, but you are 16, and the glasshouse has a glass door with a muslin blind, and you see, once, before you make yourself stop, the infant laid in the wicker chair, propped with the shawl, one small fist curled at the cheek, arranged by those gentle hands into the exact attitude of sleep. and the mother standing back against the painted backdrop with her own fist pressed to her mouth, and Mr. Marlowe bent behind the camera, unhurried as if the light would wait all evening, because for once in this trade there is no fidgeting to fear, and the terrible mercy of that thought closes your throat. This is not rare. This is the trade. For every 10 families in this city, God takes a child from at least one before its first birthday, and most of those children were never photographed alive, because a guinea is a guinea, and there was always going to be time later. Then there is no later, and the photographer is sent for, and the one likeness that will ever exist is made now or never. Mr. Marlowe charges these sittings at half his rate, and for the poorest he has been known to lose the entry from the ledger altogether, and Mrs. Marlowe, who audits that ledger like scripture, has never once remarked upon it. You will learn why before the year is out. Not tonight. Tonight, after the couple has gone down the cleared stair with their parcel and their receipt for 12 cards, you carry the plate to the darkroom for Mr. Marlowe, and you see him do a thing he does not know you see. Before he sets to work, he unlocks the shallow drawer at the end of the darkroom bench. The drawer you were told on your first day is not yours to open, not ever, not to clean, not to tidy, not if the house is burning. It stands open perhaps 4 seconds. Inside there is a case, small, the size of a prayer book, red velvet gone bald at the corners, the kind of case daguerreotypes were sold in 20 years ago. He does not open it. He touches it, once, with 2 fingers, the way you'd touch a sleeping person's shoulder to say, "I'm here," and then the drawer is locked again, and he is all business, and you are studying the fixing bath as if it were the most interesting water in England. You ask Thomas about the drawer that night, in the attic, in the dark. A long silence, and then Thomas's voice, flat in a way you haven't heard it. 3 years I've been here. I asked once. Once. Don't you ask at all. And he turns over, and that is the whole conversation. You lie awake listening to Regent Street go quiet by inches, the last cabs, a watchman's step, the small bells at midnight, and you think about the day. A wool merchant's wife holding her breath. A laugh hidden behind the acid bottles. 11 pounds of silver asleep in dirty water. A locked drawer with a bald velvet case in it. An infant photographed into eternity in the attitude of sleep. Stillness is the trade, you think. The words arrive on their own, in something like Mr. Marlowe's voice. Stillness is the trade. Everyone climbs those stairs to stop time, and time, in this house, actually stops. 8 seconds at a go. You're almost asleep when you finally place the feeling that has been following you since 4 o'clock. It is not horror. That's what you'd have guessed back in Norfolk. It is jealousy's opposite. It is the knowledge that you have put your hands today on the only kind of magic your century actually possesses, and that it is real, and that it is made of glass and silver and light and grief, and that you, William Ansell, 5 weeks off the Norwich coach, are being taught it. Tomorrow the bells will pull you up at 6. Tomorrow the bath, the cans, the stairs, the light. But that's tomorrow. Right now, this attic, this blanket, this ache in your shoulders that is the honest ache of work, right now is enough. Here endeth, as the rector used to say, the first lesson. The weeks find a rhythm after that, the way weeks do. Bath, cans, stairs, light, sitters up, plates down, prints washed, prints toned, prints trimmed with the ivory-handled knife, and pasted to their little cards with the house's name printed on the back in copper plate. Your hands stop burning from the ammonia and start merely being hands again, older-looking hands than a 16-year-old owns anywhere but this trade. May warms the glasshouse. June makes it an oven, and you learn the summer drill. Blinds half drawn by 10, water sprinkled on the floorboards, and the sitters glowing gently in their layers of wool and whalebone while Mr. Marlowe murmurs, "Stillness now, stillness," and the whole roof ticks and creaks with heat like a kettle coming to temper. And on a Wednesday in June, a shilling day, Mr. Marlowe does an unheard-of thing. He shuts the studio at noon and takes you and Thomas to the exhibition. You've been hearing about it for months. Everyone in England has been hearing about it for months. The International Exhibition of 1862 at South Kensington, the successor to the Great Crystal Palace Show of 1851, which people still talk about the way they talk about a comet. A building like a brick cliff along Cromwell Road, 6 acres of it and more under glass and iron, and above it 2 vast glass domes, each 260 feet high, which the newspapers say are the largest domes ever raised by man, larger than St. Paul's, larger than St. Peter's in Rome, and which the same newspapers in their next breath call the ugliest, like a pair of colossal soup tureens. You queue with your shilling among excursion crowds off the trains, Lancashire voices, Devon voices, voices from everywhere. Wool is spun and coal is cut, and then you are inside in a nave taller than any church in Norfolk, with light falling in cathedral sheets onto more made things than you knew the world contained. Machinery in motion, whole avenues of it, spinning and stamping and breathing steam, Armstrong guns, a lighthouse lantern turning, silks from Lyon, porcelain from Dresden, a fountain of eau de Cologne that scents a full acre of the nave, an ingot of aluminium, the new wonder metal once dearer than gold, and you move through all of it like a boy wading a river until Mr. Marlowe brings you, by design, walking faster these last 100 yards than you have ever seen him walk, to the photographic department. Photographs, floor to ceiling, hundreds upon hundreds, framed from every nation that makes them, landscapes of the Alps that make a woman beside you say, "Oh," as if she'd been shown the mountains themselves, views of Egypt, of the cedars of Lebanon, of American rivers, portraits the size of paintings, instantaneous views, the newest marvel, street scenes taken in a fraction of a second with special shutters, in which, for once, walking men are caught mid-stride, sharp, unfrozen, alive, and people crowd these particular frames and point, because nobody has ever seen a photograph of Hurry before. 23 years, Mr. Marlowe says quietly beside you. He's looking at the wall the way farmers look at weather. That's all this is, boy. 23 years. And standing there in the roar of the nave, he gives you the whole history like a man laying out cards. Paris, August 1839. Monsieur Daguerre's process announced to a packed academy, given free to all the world by the French government, free to all the world except England, mind, where Daguerre had quietly taken out a patent 2 weeks before, so that London became the one city on earth where you needed a license to make the miracle, which is why the trade here grew up crabbed and costly and litigious. March 1841. Richard Beard opens Europe's first portrait studio at the Polytechnic on Regent Street. Blue glass, mirrored roof, sitters queuing down the stairs, a guinea a likeness, and Beard makes a fortune, buys the English patent outright, spends the rest of the decade suing infringers, and by 1849 the fortune is spent on lawyers and Beard is bankrupt. The man who owned photography in England, bankrupt. Mr. Marlowe says that without any expression at all, which is how you know it is the most important sentence in the story. Then 1851, and Archer, and the wet plate. given free, no patent, and the whole daguerreotype world dead within 5 years, all that mirror polishing and mercury fuming swept away by glass and collodion, and the men who had paid Beard for licenses left holding the deeds to an extinct animal. Marlowe survived the crossing. Many didn't. Then 1854, a Frenchman named Disdairy patents the notion of putting 8 little portraits on one plate, cutting them apart, pasting them on cards the size of a visiting card, and selling the dozen cheap, and the carte de visite is born. And in August 1860, the American Mayol, whose studio stands this minute a few doors up Regent Street from your own attic, photographs the Queen and Prince Albert as carts, and the royal album goes on sale to the public, and England goes mad. Cardomania, the papers call it, mania being for once the correct medical term. 60,000 of a single cart of the Queen sold, albums on every parlour table in the kingdom, with slots waiting like mouths. Everyone collects everyone. Royalty, bishops, murderers, actresses, one's own aunts. 300 or 400 million carts a year now, someone has reckoned, in Britain alone. You'd doubt the figure if you hadn't stood in the printing room of your own small house and watched Thomas paste 200 faces onto cards in a single evening, and yours is one studio of perhaps 200 in London, and London is one city. 23 years, Mr. Marlowe says again. I have seen this trade born, boy. Men my age have watched the impossible become a shilling article. He looks at you sideways, one of his rare full looks. So when I am particular about a filtered bath and a clean plate, it is because I remember when this, the whole wall, the Alps, the frozen walkers, could not be done by any king on earth. We are handed a miracle at a guinea the dozen. The least we owe it is care. It is the longest speech you will hear from him for months, and it is interrupted by the crowd itself, which shifts and murmurs and carries you all three along the wall to where the thickest knot of people stands, and you see what they are looking at, and the murmur explains the year to you better than any newspaper has. Photographs of Prince Albert. Because the Prince Consort is dead. He died at Windsor last December, the 14th of December 1861. Typhoid fever. 42 years old, and this entire exhibition was his child, planned by him, and he did not live to walk through the doors, and the opening ceremony in May was held with an empty chair, so to speak. The great ode sung, and the guns fired, and the one man it was all for lying 5 months in his tomb. The Queen is shut away in black and will not come. And in the week after he died, the photograph shop sold 70,000 of his cart. 70,000 in a week. People queuing on the pavement in mourning gloves to buy a small stiff picture of a dead man's grave, unsmiling face. Look at the faces around you now, in front of those frames. This is a nation that has decided from the throne downward that grief is the dignified condition, that black is the correct colour, that a portrait is a serious thing because life is short and eternity is long. The Queen herself will pose for the camera again and again in the years coming, in her widow's cap beside a marble bust of her dead husband, and those pictures will sell in the tens of thousands too, and no one will find it strange. That is the country you are photographing. When it climbs your stairs in its best black and sits down in front of your lens and composes its face into solemn stone, it is not failing to smile. It is succeeding at something else. That's the second reason, and you learned it at the exhibition of 1862, under the largest domes ever built, in front of 70,000 pictures of a dead man. It's that recent. It's that real. On the walk home, Thomas buys 3 baked potatoes off a can on the Brompton Road, 2pence each, and the 3 of you eat them walking. Even Mr. Marlowe, who eats his with a pocket knife and more dignity than most men bring to a cathedral. And nobody talks much, and the potato is hot and floury in your black-stained hands, and it is one of the best meals of your life. That could be you, Thomas says at last, nodding back at nothing, at the domes, at the wall of frames, at the whole impossible day, and he doesn't finish the sentence, and he doesn't need to. Some version of that sentence is walking home inside every apprentice in London tonight. The glasshouse the next morning is 32 feet long again, and the water cans are £30 again, and the alderman is coming at 11 about his fullness. But something has shifted. You've seen the size of the thing you're a small part of. You carry the cans up 4 flights, and for once they carry easy. July teaches you children. Children are the terror of the trade, and the trade is honest with itself about this in a way it is honest about little else. A grown sitter can be reasoned into 8 seconds of stillness. A child of 3 cannot be reasoned into anything, and iron arms will not hold what iron arms cannot be admitted to touch, because no mother alive will watch her infant clamped. So the glasshouse keeps an arsenal. A stuffed canary on a wire, which is the birdie, the actual birdie that generations will go on being told to watch, long after anyone remembers it was ever real. A brass bell. A monkey of grey, plush with one glass eye, the other lost in some campaign before your time. And Mr. Marlowe's voice, which can go somewhere his face never goes, soft and conspiratorial. Watch the little bird, there, see him, he is going to whistle, and the child stares at the canary with the huge frozen gravity of the very young, and the cap comes off the lens, and 1 and 2 and 3, and some days you get the plate, and some days you get a small blurred storm in a pinafore, and Thomas coats another plate, and another, and another. 4 plates for 1 fidgeting cherub is a bad morning's arithmetic. And Mrs. Marlowe prices infant sittings accordingly, and mothers pay it, because the mothers know better than anyone in England why you photograph a child this year and not next year. Nobody says that part aloud. It stands in the corner of every infant sitting like one more piece of studio furniture. And there is a second trick for the smallest ones, which you will think for the rest of your life is the strangest sight the trade ever showed you. A mother seated in the chair with a great drape of carpet thrown over her whole head and body, shapeless as a sofa, holding her baby upright on her hidden lap with her hidden hands. The child sits, apparently alone, mysteriously supported. The mother breathes in the dark underneath. In the finished cart you can see, if you know to look, that the sofa has knees. July also teaches you the man who wanted to grin. He comes up on a Saturday, a big sandy man, a builder's foreman with his week's money in his pocket and 2 friends' worth of beer in him, wanting his likeness taken, and when Mr. Marlowe has him seated and settled and cradled, the man announces that he'll have it done laughing. Thank you. None of your funeral faces for him. He's paying. And he pulls his mouth into a great gap-toothed festival of a grin and holds it. Mr. Marlowe does not argue. Mr. Marlowe never argues. He takes the plate. Then he sends you down for it, develops it, and lays the finished proof in front of the man without one word of commentary, and you watch the grin die on the living face as it inspects itself on the glass one. Held for 9 seconds, the grin has become a rictus. The eyes have deadened, the lips have dried and stuck, the whole face has the look, there is no kinder phrase, of a man being pinched somewhere out of frame, and the teeth. You are a century and more too early for dentistry worth the name. This is a city of 40-year-olds with brown stumps and gaps, a city where a fine set of false teeth is a rich man's article, and everyone else simply learns from adolescence, the closed-mouth arts. That is a third reason, since you're collecting them. Half this country has spent its whole adult life training its face to keep its teeth private, and no camera is going to untrain them in an afternoon. Perhaps, Mr. Marlowe says at last gently, something quieter. The second plate, quiet, closed, grave, makes the foreman look like a magistrate. He is delighted. He orders the dozen. He goes down the stairs, telling his friends he never held with grinning pictures anyway. A man wants some dignity about him, and Mr. Marlowe catches your eye for 1/4 of a second, and that quarter second is the entire joke, shared, filed, never spoken. And that is the fourth reason, and it may be the biggest of them all, bigger than the seconds and the teeth together, so let it be said plainly. These people are not sad. You have stood beside the camera all summer, and you can testify. They come up the stairs laughing, they chatter, they tease each other, they flirt. The glasshouse on a busy Saturday is as merry as a fairground queue. And then they sit, and they put their merriment down, the way they'd take off a hat in church, because to them a portrait is not a moment of life. It is a monument to a life. Most of them will be photographed once, perhaps twice, ever. A guinea the dozen, remember. This one face is the face that will hang in the parlour when they are old, the face their grandchildren will know them by, the face, and everyone has seen such carts on such tables. That will be all that is left. You do not grin at eternity. Eternity in 1862 is a serious appointment. A gentleman sits for posterity the way he'd sit for a painter, and no one in 3 centuries of painted portraits ever grinned from a frame either, except drunkards and low comedians in low pictures, which is exactly the company a respectable face declines to keep. Laughter, printed and fixed, belongs to the music hall. Composure belongs to the parlour. Every sitter knows the difference in their bones, and not one of them needs it explained. A portrait is not a moment, Mr. Marlowe says, the one time you ask him about all this straight out. He is polishing the great lens with a scrap of wash leather, and he answers without looking up, in the voice of a man quoting his own oldest scripture. A portrait is a monument, boy. They come to us to be remembered, not to be caught. Remember the difference, and you'll never take a likeness a family is ashamed of. August brings the heat to its worst, and one Sunday afternoon Thomas takes you east, because you have been in London 5 months and seen, as he puts it, 3 streets and a chemist's, and a man should know the size of the town that's eaten him. You go on foot the whole way, down through the roaring emptiness of Sunday Regent Street, along the Strand, up Fleet Street, past St. Paul's with its congregations pouring out into the city proper, streets with wool and iron in their very names, and at the foot of Fish Street Hill, Thomas stops and points up, and there it is, the monument, the tallest isolated stone column in the world, put up between 1671 and 1677 to Wren and Hook's design to remember the Great Fire, 202 feet high, standing 202 feet from the spot in Pudding Lane where the fire began, which is the kind of tidy fact this city almost never permits itself. 3d to the keeper at the door, and then the stairs, 311 of them, a black stone corkscrew turning up through the column's hollow core, your boots ringing, your hand on the cold central newel, light arriving in coins through the little loopholes, and Thomas counting the whole way out loud just to be irritating, and then the door at the top, and the cage of iron round the gallery, and London, all of it. That's what you are not prepared for. All of it at once. The river first, a broad-hammered pewter serpent, crowded with more masts than you could count in a week. Colliers and barges and steamers trailing threads of smoke, and London Bridge just below you with its slow black paste of traffic, and the pool beyond, ships from every port on earth waiting their turn at the wharves. Then the roofs, an ocean of them, grey and brown and smoking, running out in every direction to the edge of seeing, stitched with spires, and the dome of St. Paul's riding it all like a moored balloon, and under that grey-brown ocean invisible breathing 3 million people. From up here you cannot hear them as voices. You hear them as one continuous soft roar, like the sea in a shell, like a fire in another room. The sound of everyone. There's a thing, I think, up here, Thomas says. He's leaning on the rail with the wind moving his hair, and for once there is nothing sly in his face at all. Every soul down there has a face, and every one of those faces is going to be gone. What? Inside of 70 years. All of them. That whole town of faces wiped clean and replaced, same as the town before it, and nobody now can tell you what the town before it looked like. Not really. Not truly. He nods down at it. We're the first ones, Will. First trade in the history of the world that can actually keep them. Whatever else the work is. Scrubbing plates, hauling water, alderman's fat, that's what it is underneath. That's why I'll have my own house one day. Brighton, I think. Sea light steady, and every fool in England goes to Brighton and wants proof. He grins, sly again. 6pence you're still hauling Marlowe's cans when I've got my name in gold on a fascia. You don't take the bet. Standing up there with the wind and the roar and the whole mortal city spread out underneath you like one enormous unphotographed family group, you'd have paid the 6pence just for the sentence. First trade in the history of the world that can keep them. You're barely a cog in it, a can carrier, a plate scrubber with silver stains and one silk neckcloth, but you're in it, you're part of it. 311 steps back down, and your knees at the bottom feel like a stranger's, and Thomas buys shrimps in paper from a stall by Billingsgate because, he says, sea air, and the two of you walk home the long way west with the sun going down red through the smoke. And that is the day you stop being homesick. You don't notice it happening. You only notice, weeks later, that it stopped. Then October comes, and October is when you learn that this whole shining trade hangs by one thread, and the thread is the sky. The fogs begin, not mist. London fog, the true article, coal smoke and river damp rolled together into a substance you can taste, a substance with a colour no honest word fits. The newspapers say pea soup, and the newspapers are flattering it. It comes down over the West End like a lid, and the glasshouse, your bright chemical engine on the roof, simply stops. The light on the worst days is not weak, it is absent. A brown twilight at 11 in the morning, and exposures stretch from 8 seconds to 30 to 40 to don't bother. A sitter cannot hold 40 seconds. Nobody can hold 40 seconds, not a lieutenant, not a bishop, not a statue with a headache. Mrs. Marlowe's book empties. Appointments melt off the page with polite notes, and the reception fire burns coal for nobody, and you spend whole days printing back orders in a printing room where even the printing frames, propped at the windows, take an hour to do 20 minutes work. And when money stops coming up the stairs, you notice who else is hungry. There is a man named Baxter. You've heard his name all year the way you hear a dripping tap, because Baxter, 3 years ago, was an assistant like Thomas, an operator in a goods strand house, and now Baxter has premises of his own down by the New Cut south of the river, where he makes portraits at sixpence. Sixpence? 1/42nd of Mr. Marlowe's dozen. He does it on volume, a toot at the door hauling in passers-by, sitters in and out like a turnstile, plates poured thin, prints washed quick, and quick washing is the fatal corner to cut, because a print not washed free of its chemicals fades, browns, ghosts away to nothing inside a year or two, so that half the poor of London are paying sixpence for pictures that are quietly dying in their frames even as they're hung. Thomas calls Baxter's whole street the sixpenny gallows. Mr. Marlowe does not call it anything, which from him is savage. But here is the thing you cannot unsee once you've seen it. Baxter's customers could never, not in any year of their lives, have climbed your stairs. Costermongers, laundresses, soldiers' girls, a dustman and his wife in their Sunday clothes, sixpence between them, and immortality. Cardamania didn't stop at the servants' hall, it went straight through it and down, and for every duchess in Mrs. Marlowe's book there are 500 Londoners who will only ever be photographed by a Baxter or not at all. A dying photograph, it turns out, still beats no photograph. You think of the mother and the wicker chair. Everyone in this city is running the same race against the same clock. Some can only afford the sixpenny lane of it. You meet him just once that autumn, in Mr. Pole's shop, a worn, quick-eyed man of 30 buying cheap collodion and cheaper paper, and he clocks your neckcloth and where you're from with one flick of a glance and says, not unkindly, Regent Street. Tell your governor the fog eats guineas, same as Tanner's. And he wheezes off into the brown air with his bottles, and Mr. Pole watches him go and says, mildly, to the shelves, that one coats his plates too thin and his conscience thinner, but he feeds 4 children off sixpences, and there's houses up west that couldn't. You're learning that in this trade, as in this city, nothing holds still long enough to be simply despised. It is in the same brown October that the note comes from Suffolk. A woman's hand, careful, the letters form the way they teach in a charity school. Her husband is dead 2 years. Now her son. The boy is laid out at home, and could Mr. Marlowe come, she has heard, someone in her court has told her that he comes. He comes. And this time, because Thomas is needed on the printing, he takes you. You go by cab, the camera case upright between your knees like a coffin's little cousin, the portable dark tent and the chest of bottles at your feet, south down through the fog to the river, and across London Bridge itself. The new bridge of 1831, 5 granite arches, the busiest crossing in the world, though today it hangs in the murk like a bridge in a dream, the parapets running with wet, the traffic feeling its way, dray bells clinking, the whole river below you invisible and yet there felt, a cold breathing gap in the city, foghorns lowing somewhere down toward the pool like cattle in another world. Mr. Marlowe says nothing the whole crossing. He holds the lens case on his lap, both hands over it, the way a different sort of man would hold a Bible. Southwark, when you come down into it, is a lesson in itself, and the lesson is that London has a backside, tanneries and hat works and vinegar yards, and the smell of hides and glue boiling lying under the fog, streets narrowing, courts opening off courts, washing strung dead and grey in air that will never dry it, until the cab can go no further, and you carry the cases the last 200 yards on foot, and the children of the court gather silently to watch you pass, because everyone here knows exactly what a man with a camera case is coming for when he comes walking slow. Her name is Mrs. Ashworth. She is perhaps 30, a shirt maker, and her room is one room, 3rd floor, and it is poor and it is scoured, scrubbed to the bone, the poverty that fights, and on the bed, washed and combed and dressed in a collar his mother has starched for him, is Albert. Albie, she says, 8 years old. Scarlet fever, which took 4 others in the court this month besides. He looks, and you will never again believe anyone who mocks the phrase, he looks asleep. There is 1 photograph's worth of light in that room, and Mr. Marlowe finds it. He works for an hour with the quiet unhurry you saw through the muslin blind in April, moving the bed a hand's width at a time toward the window, folding the light in with a white sheet held by you, and he asks the mother for the boy's things, and she brings them, a peg top, a battered tin soldier, a slate with his letters still on it, sponged at the corner where he'd started to rub them out, and Mr. Marlowe puts the top and the soldier by the boy's hand and leaves the slate, letters and all, propped where the plate will find it. And then, at the end, he does the thing you will think about for the rest of your life. He asks her, would she wish to be in it beside him? And she stops still and says, in a voice with holes worn through it, that she's never been photographed, that she hasn't the money for 2 likenesses, that the 6-penny man on the cut had said, once for her husband, that, and the sentence never finds its end. 1 plate, madam, Mr. Marlowe says, 1 likeness of you both, it is the same labour to me. She sits on the bed and takes her son's hand, and she does not look at the camera, she looks at him, and Mr. Marlowe uncaps the lens for 30 long fog-dim seconds, and you count them in your head, 1 and 2 and 3, and the room is so still that you can hear the fog dripping off the eaves outside, and a mangle thumping somewhere floors below, and the small dry click at 30 when the cap goes home, and that is the plate. She offers him her shillings, kept ready in a twist of paper. He takes 2 of them, because charity refused whole is charity spoiled, writes her a receipt as gravely as he'd write an alderman's, and tells her the carts will come Thursday week. You pack the cases, and it is going back over the bridge, the fog thickening toward dusk, the lamps coming on early like a procession of small moons, that Mr. Marlowe talks, voice level, eyes ahead, the lens case on his knees. You saw the drawer in April, he says. Not a question. Of course he saw you see. The man's whole life is noticing what stands where the light falls. You say yes, sir, and your ears go hot in the cold. Her name was Clara, he says. Our daughter, born 1843. In the autumn of 1849, the cholera came through Lambeth, where we then lodged, and took 14,000 in London that season, and she was one of them, 6 years old. The cab wheels grind on the granite. Somewhere under the fog a tug sounds its horn. I was a daguerreotypist in those days, and trade was poor and plates were dear, and I always meant to make her likeness when times mended. I had the means in my own 2 hands, boy. The one thing in the world I could do better than any man in my street, and I put it off, and put it off, and the times mended in November, and in the October she died. What lies in that drawer is the likeness I made of her on the 3rd day, by our window, in the only hour of my life I have ever worked drunk. It is not good work. The focus is soft, my hands. He stops, starts again, level as before. It is the only face of her there is in this world, and I made it too late. And I have carried these 35 ounces of glass and silver, or their like, up and down every staircase in London since, so that no other man or woman need own such a drawer as mine. Now you know why the ledger forgets what it forgets. You'll not speak of this, and I'll not speak of it again. And he doesn't. Not that winter, not ever. Not even at the end of your year. But you understand the house now, all of it at once, the way a plate understands the sitter when the developer goes over it. The half rates, the cleared stare at 4 o'clock, Mrs. Marlowe's 3-hair brush laying living colour on dead cheeks with the patience of prayer, the 2 touched fingers on the bald velvet, the whole grave, unsmiling art of them. This tray did not choose solemnity out of dullness. It stands every working day, with 1 foot in the churchyard, taking the only faces that will ever exist of people who are running out of time, and it knows it, and that knowledge is in the very furniture. You cannot spend your mornings photographing what Mr. Marlowe photographs and then ask the afternoon's bride to say cheese. The gravity of the one soaks into the other. It is one art, one chair, one lens, and it points, day in and day out, at love and loss by turns, and it has learned one face for both. Thursday week you print Mrs. Ashworth's dozen yourself, and you wash those prints, wash them like the fate of nations hangs on it, an hour in running water, until not a ghost of a chemical remains, because these ones are not allowed to fade. November, and the fog stops being an event and becomes a tenant. It moves in over the city and it does not pay rent. And when I say the light dies, I need you to understand what that means in a trade that eats light and eats nothing else. Because this is not a matter of a gloomy day here and there. This is a fortnight at a stretch, when 11 in the morning is the colour of stewed tea, when the gas burns in every shop on Regent Street from opening to closing, when the street beyond the plate glass is a brown aquarium where shapes swim past with their collars up, and the glass house, your whole bright chemical engine on the roof, gives perhaps 2 grudging working hours out of the 24, and some days gives nothing at all. The book empties again. The polite notes come up on trays, and Mrs. Marlowe files them without comment, and the reception fire burns for nobody, and coal has gone up 4 shillings on the ton since October, because 3 million people are burning it against the dark, which is, if you think about it, the fog feeding itself. And in the north, the papers say, the cotton mills are stopping for want of American cotton. The war over there has strangled the supply at the root. Half of Lancashire is on relief. And Mr. Pole says even the price of good rag paper will feel it by spring. You're beginning to understand that a photographer's ledger is a barometer that measures weather, war, cotton, coal, and grief all at once, and that nothing in this city moves without moving everything else. But November also gives you the thing you will keep, on a thin Tuesday toward the end of the month with exactly 1 sitting in the book, a young curate from Finsbury who wants a cart for his widowed mother. Mr. Marlowe flexes his right hand over the collodion bottle and stops. The cold has been getting into his knuckles all month. You have watched him working his fingers over the reception fire in the early mornings when he believes nobody's looking, the way a man works a stiff hinge. Pour it, he says. He is looking at you. You have poured waste plates all autumn, spoiled glass, practice glass, Thomas standing over you saying again. You have never poured for a paying sitter. Your mouth goes dry in a way the ether smell has nothing to do with, and you take the plate onto the spread fingertips of your left hand, level as a tray of full glasses, and you pour the collodion into the centre, a pool the size of a crown, and you tilt, corner to corner to corner, one smooth travelling wave, the ether reeking up cold off the glass, and you drain the surplus back into the bottle from the last corner at exactly the angle, Thomas beat into you, so the film set's even. No ridges, no crepey lines, no starved corner. Then into the silver bath in one unbroken motion, because a hesitation halfway prints itself on the plate as a line, forever. The plate remembers everything, including doubt. 3 minutes in the bath, counted, not guessed, into the dark slide. Up the stairs at the pace that is quick without being a jolt. And the curate holds his mild stillness for the 20 seconds the November light demands, and you carry the slide back down with your own heart going like a printing press, and you develop it with Mr. Marlowe standing silent at your shoulder in the red gloom, and the image rises out of the whiteness the way images do, and it is clean. Even film, even sky, the collar sharp, the eyes quiet. Adequate, Mr. Marlowe says. From Mr. Marlowe, adequate is a laurel wreath. You varnish the plate with your ears burning hotter than the lamp. 14 months, Thomas says that night in the attic, and lets it hang there in the dark. 14 months before he let me pour for a sitter. A rustle as he turns over. Don't let it swell your head. It's the fog. Plates are cheap to risk when there's no trade anyway, so he trains you while it's cheap. That's how he thinks. Everything in season. A pause. And then, because Thomas can never quite finish on a sour note with you anymore. It was a clean pour, though. I looked. On the quiet evenings of that starved month, when the shop shutters go up at 5 because there is nothing to stay open for, you sometimes sit at the back room window with the mending or the ledger of plate stocks and watch the street go dark. The lamplighter comes up the far side with his pole and his little ladder, lamp by lamp, each one blooming brown in the fog rather than yellow. A string of dirty pearls hung down Regent Street. The last omnibus horses lean into their collars. A girl goes by under the window selling lucifer matches, calling soft, because by this hour even the street cries are tired, and you find you're keeping the day's faces the way the plate keeps them. The curate gone home to Finsbury with his mother's Christmas present wrapped in silver paper. The lieutenant, months at sea by now. His dozen carts scattered from Portsmouth to wherever the China station has taken him. A wool merchant's wife. A laugh behind the acid bottles. A drawer with a velvet case in it. The world contains all of it. The fog and the silver and the grief and the guineas. And tomorrow will be the bath and the cans and the stairs again. The same as yesterday, the same as tomorrow. But tonight there is just the window, and the lamps coming on, and the city breathing brown against the glass. Then December, and December comes in on a gale. It gets up in the night, the second week of the month, a southwester that has crossed 400 miles of ocean without meeting anything worth its attention until it meets the rooftops of London, and you lie in the attic listening to the whole house work like a ship. Joists and rafters conversing in their sleep, the slates drumming, and above it all the long glass roof of the studio humming one low note like a wetted wine-glass rim. And then, some time past 2, a report. Not loud, precise. The sound of glass deciding. You know before you're out of the blankets. The blue pane, the cracked one, third from the end. Patched corner to corner with oiled paper since before your time in this house. 2 years the paper has bellied and dried and bellied again, and tonight the wind got a finger under it, and the pane has gone entire. The 3 of you are up there by lantern light in your nightshirts and boots, and I want you to notice what happens first, because it tells you everything about this trade. Before one hand touches the broken glass, Mr. Marlowe carries the collodion bottles, and the ether can down 2 flights and stands them in the yard passage, because a closed lantern is still aflame, and a nightshirt is still a nightshirt, and gun cotton is still gun cotton. Then, and only then, the glass. Rain is driving through the gap in long slants across the sitter's chair, the velvet dark with it, and the three of you get a board up and 2 thicknesses of brown paper over the board, Thomas on the ladder swearing softly and continuously in a way that is half language and half wind, your fingers dead as pegs, and by 3:30 it is done, and the studio is a drum with one ear stopped, and everyone goes back to bed and nobody sleeps. In the morning the glasshouse is 10 degrees colder and the light has a wrongness on the north side, a boarded blindness where the softest of it used to come through. Mr. Marlowe stands in the middle of the floor and looks at the gap for a long moment. Then he goes down and looks at the ledger, which is the other weather. Then he angles the chair a further degree from the missing pane, and the board stays. 11 shillings is still 11 shillings, and December is a month with its pockets sewn shut. The sitters keep their coats on now between plates, and their breath shows faintly in the cold light while they hold their stillness, little ghosts of themselves standing at their own lips, and more than one of them remarks that it is fresh up here, isn't it? And Mr. Marlowe says that a cool room keeps the chemicals honest, which is not entirely a lie and not entirely the truth, which is the exact recipe for what a tradesman is allowed to say. And it is in that cold December, on a Sunday evening shortly before Christmas, that you nearly burn yourself out of the story. You are tired in the particular end-of-year way, tired past carefulness, and you carry the candle up the attic stairs and set it on the shelf while you wash. And the shelf is a foot from the nail where your working coat hangs, and the rule, the first rule of the house, the rule you've kept for 9 months without one lapse, is asleep somewhere inside you. You turn your back. You get one handful of water to your face, and behind you there is a smell like burnt sugar, and then a soft sound, a whoomp, like a pigeon leaving a ledge. The cuff of the coat has a ragged edge of flame on it, pale, liquid, almost gentle, and it is climbing. You do not remember deciding anything. You have the coat off the nail and down on the floorboards, and the blanket off your own cot over it, and your whole weight on the blanket. And you kneel there in the dark, because you have knocked the candle out too, with your heart doing something in your chest that no clock could follow, for what is probably 10 seconds and is also somehow a year. From the other cot Thomas's voice, flat and wide awake, and he has not moved at all. And that's why the rule's the rule. The coat survives. The cuff carries a scorch the size of a crown piece, stiff and brown, and no sponging will shift it, and you stop trying, because every morning after buttoning that cuff, the scorch says it's one word to you, and the word is gun cotton, and you have decided you need to hear it daily. Collodion made your trade possible, and collodion is patient, and collodion does not forgive twice. You got your once. Mr. Marlowe's eye finds the scorch inside a day, of course. He looks at it, and looks at you, and says nothing whatever, which is somehow worse than a month of lectures and works better than one. Christmas Day the studio is dark, and the back room holds more warmth than it has held all month. Mrs. Marlowe roasts a goose whose smell reaches the attic like a rumour by 9 in the morning, and like a fact by noon. And there is plum pudding with a silver joey hidden in it, which Thomas gets, to his enormous and unconcealed satisfaction. And Mr. Marlowe says grace over all of it, and means every word in his dry level way. There is a shilling each for you and Thomas, wrapped in white paper, and for once nobody talks about silver except the 6pence in the pudding. And over the pudding, Thomas sets down his spoon and makes his announcement, and the announcement is Brighton. A house on the front there, a good one, has offered him the operator's place for the coming season, 30 shillings a week and a room over the shop and the sea light, which is steady light, the steadiest in England off all that water. He goes after 12th night. He has the letter upstairs. He has clearly had the letter upstairs for some days, carrying it about like a warm coal, waiting for the right table to lay it on. Mrs. Marlowe, it turns out, has known since Tuesday, because Mrs. Marlowe always knows, and has already written to a woman she knows in Brighton about respectable lodgings for the weeks before his room is ready. Mr. Marlowe's quiet a moment. Then he nods once. "You'll keep a clean bath," he says. In this trade, that is a blessing, an ordination, and a goodbye, all in 5 words. That night the attic candle burns down to a thumbnail while Thomas talks. Sea light and gold letters, and which pier the excursion trains empty onto, and how every fool in England goes to Brighton sooner or later, and every fool wants proof, and you lie on your back listening, glad for him, and desolate for yourself in exactly equal measure, and you say neither thing, because you are learning from a good school that the important sentences are the ones you keep. 12th night comes, and then the 7th of January, and the shop door at 7 in the morning, and Thomas with his box corded on his shoulder, and his breath white in the street, shaking hands all round like a man being launched. Mr. Marlowe gives him his character, sealed, and with it a second paper, folded small. And Thomas reads the second paper and goes very still, and puts it away inside his coat without one word, and you never learn what was written on it, and you never ask. Mrs. Marlowe gives him sandwiches wrapped in yesterday's Times and tells him the sea air is no excuse for cheap lodgings, and at the last, on the step, Thomas turns to you. "Firm, then stop," he says. "That's the whole trade, if you think on it." A pause. The grin, sly as the first morning you met him. 6pence stands. And he goes off down Regent Street through the frost with his box on his shoulder, toward the Brighton train, getting smaller, and does not look back, because looking back is not a thing Thomas does, and you stand on the step until Mrs. Marlowe says, not unkindly, that the step will sweep itself no faster for being stood on. The attic that night is the size of a cathedral. January does one merciful thing. It kills the fog. A hard frost comes down in the first week of 1863 and holds for a fortnight, and the air goes clean and blue and cruel. There is ice in the wash basin every morning now. A pane of it you crack with a knuckle, and the handles of the water cans burn your palms with cold through the rag you wrap them in, and the 4 flights feel like 8. But the sky is suddenly worth money. Short days, sharp light, and the chemistry drinks it, and the exposures drop back to 8 and 10 seconds, and the book begins, cautiously, to fill. Skaters are out on the Serpentine, the papers say, thousands of them, and the chestnut men do the trade of their lives at every corner, and your 17th birthday passes in the middle of the frost week, marked by nothing except that Mrs. Marlowe, who has never been told the date and has certainly never asked, puts an egg on your breakfast plate and looks at you with a face that forbids all comment. Her ledger is not the only thing she keeps to the penny. The new boy comes the 2nd Monday of the month. His name is Davy Prescott. He is 14, a carrier's son from Croydon, small for his age, with chapped hands and a cap he has not yet grown into, and he gets lost between the 2nd floor landing and the attic on his first evening, which you would not have believed possible until you watch him do it. He calls you sir on the first day. You look over your shoulder to see who he means. There is nobody behind you. That is the moment you understand what has happened to you in 10 months. You're the senior assistant of a Regent Street house. You have a scorched cuff and black fingers and a litany in your head. And to this boy you are the one who knows everything. So you teach him, and the strangest part of teaching him is your own voice. You open your mouth and Thomas comes out, and behind Thomas, Mr. Marlowe, and behind Mr. Marlowe somewhere, Old Pole. The plate remembers everything. Stand well back from lamps. Firm, then stop. Check your hands of a morning the way a sailor checks the sky. The trade hands itself down like a catechism, word for word, boy to boy, and you are a link in that chain now whether you feel ready or not, and you do not feel ready, and neither, you now realize, did Thomas, and neither, once, did the man with the watch. The first week Davy breaks the big glass funnel. 9p. He goes white as albumen paper when it leaves his hand, whiter when it lands. At the week's end the 9p stands against his wages in Mrs. Marlowe's copper plate, and not one word is said about it at any table, and you take him up to the attic and tell him about the coat, and show him the scorched cuff, and give him the rule of the house as you have come to understand it. In this house, what is priced is forgiven. It is what never reaches the ledger that you must never touch. And his first night, after the candle is out, there is a sound from Thomas's old cot that is working very hard at not being crying. You lie there in the dark listening to it, and you're 16 years old in that other cot again, 5 weeks off the Norwich coach with a blister and a dead father's boots, and you understand something you had managed not to understand for a whole year. Thomas heard you those first weeks, every night of it, and said nothing, and let you keep your pride, and was simply there in the morning, solid, showing you how to wrap the can handles. It gets easier, you say, into the dark. The sound stops, a long sniff, then, very small, "Yes, sir." "And stop calling me sir, I carry water for a living," which gets a wet sort of laugh, which is the first brick of something. In the last week of January the refiner comes up from Clerkenwell, the way he comes every year when the trade is deadest and the house needs it most. A grey man with a grey pony and a cart with an iron-bound chest on it, and he stumps up the yard in boots you could float in, and you and Davy carry the stoneware jar out between you. 2 gallons of foul grey water that is heavier than its size, the way money is always heavier than its size, and the sack of sweepings and filter papers and silvered clippings after it. The refiner dips and swirls and peers, weighs the sack on his own steelyard because he trusts nobody's weights but his, grunts twice, and counts out onto the head of a barrel 12 pounds and 2 shillings, sovereigns and silver, each coin set down like an argument being won. 12 pounds and 2 shillings. In the leanest month of the year, the house drinks from its own dirty water and comes up whole. Davy watches the sovereigns go into Mrs. Marlowe's cash box with his mouth slightly open, and you can see education happening to his face. The same education that happened to yours over this same jar last spring, and you hear yourself say it, Thomas's line, in your own voice now. The trade wastes nothing, because the trade was hungry once. February gives Davy his own lesson, and it is nearly the worst kind. On a Monday he tears his thumb open on a hoop nail hauling the paper bales, a ragged little wound, nothing, the kind of thing a 14-year-old collects the way a coat collects lint. And that same afternoon, in the dark room, wanting to be useful, wanting to be quick, he reaches bare-handed for the fixing tray to rock it. Your hand has his wrist before your mind has finished arriving. Hard, harder than you meant. The tray trembles and stills, clear and innocent as water, which it is not, which it never was. What's in that tray? Cyanide, sir. He's forgotten the rule about sir. His eyes are enormous in the red gloom. And what's on your thumb? He looks at the thumb. He looks at the tray. You watch him do the arithmetic, and you watch the answer land, and you let go of his wrist, and old Pole's catechism comes out of you entire, word for word, the cut no bigger than a paper's edge, the splash to the lip, the fool sucking a stain off his thumb, the three men whose names have stopped being interesting. Davy stands very still through all of it, cradling his thumb like a small animal that has just been pulled off a road. On the Saturday you take him to Pole's, because that is apparently what is done with boys in this trade. You understand that now you are simply the next pair of hands doing it. And Mr. Pole looks Davy over across the counter, over the half-moon spectacles, wheezing gently, and holds up one black finger. What kills operators, boy? Davy's eyes flick to you, once, and back. Carelessness, sir. Cyanide. Both at the same time, generally. The finger comes down. The eyes over the spectacles come to you instead, mild as milk. He'll do. You'll both do. And then the news, because Pole's counter is a coffee house with bottles. Everything is up again. The paper, the ether, the glass, and it will go higher, because there is a wedding coming, boy. The biggest this country has held in a lifetime. The Prince of Wales takes his Danish princess in March, and weddings, says Mr. Pole, are to our trade what wars are to gunsmiths. You'll not sleep in March, he says, wrapping your bottles in straw, entirely satisfied at the prospect. Baxter is in the shop that same morning, buying cheap collodion in quantity and cheaper paper in more quantity on the slate, and Pole lets him have it on the slate, and Baxter clocks your neckcloth with that one quick flick and says, Regent Street, the way another man would say a chess move, and to Davy, kindly enough, mind him, he's careful. Careful men end up owning things. And he wheezes off with his bottles into the cold, and Mr. Pole watches the door close and says mildly to the shelves, 4 children, and a royal wedding coming. Even the sixpenny trade will eat well this spring. There's a kind of justice in a wedding. It feeds every level of the town at once like a flood tide, lifts the barges and the rowing boats together. And then, at the end of February, the book brings you a name you don't know attached to a face you do. A lady emigrating with her aunt, Thursday at 11, in Mrs. Marlowe's hand. And up the stairs on Thursday comes the draper's daughter from Marylebone, a year older, a ring on her hand now that was not there in April. She sails from Liverpool in the last week of March, to be married in Toronto in May, and this dozen is not for Canada. This dozen is for her mother, for the parlour in Marylebone, for the years of Sundays when there will be an ocean where a daughter used to be, the trade at both ends of every voyage. You had not thought of that before. Every emigrant ship that leaves this island now carries carte de visite one way, and leaves carte de visite behind. Paper faces keeping watch on parlour tables for people who are 7 weeks of sea away, and the same guinea buys both kinds of remembering. Mr. Marlowe seats her, arranges her, wheels the iron behind her, and as you seat the cradle to her head, she says, very quietly, not moving, no donkeys today, I hope. The corner of her mouth, the exact corner of her mouth, and then she puts it away, the way they all put it away, and holds her stillness like a woman who has practised, and the plate is perfect, grave, lovely, closed, a monument for a mantelpiece. Her mother will be glad of it all her life. Thursday week she comes to collect the dozen alone, the aunt being down with a cold, and Mrs. Marlowe is above stairs with the colours, and it is you who hands the parcel across the counter, and with the parcel an envelope, plain, unmarked. There was a second likeness, miss, you say. Your voice does the thing voices do on stairs in the dark. From last April. It was spoiled, but not entirely. She opens the envelope there at the counter and goes still. Trade stillness, sitter stillness. 8 full seconds of it. The longest you've ever watched anyone hold outside the iron. Inside the envelope is one print, one only, made by you on a Sunday in the printing frame at the attic window, of a girl with her head tipped back against an iron cradle, blurred, ruined, laughing all the way up from her boots at the outraged bray of a costermonger's donkey. Then the laugh happens again. Now, Liv, at the counter, the same laugh, a year older, quick and helpless, and it knocks a tear loose with it, and she puts the back of her wrist to her eye like a child. I had forgotten, she says, that I ever look like this. She reaches for her purse. You tell her it was a spoiled plate, that the house would have scrubbed it for the glass, that it is nothing. She looks at you across the counter for a moment, and she does not put the print with the parcel. She slides it flat inside her muff against the lining. It is not nothing, she says, where the sea can't get at it. And she goes down the stairs and out into the last of February, and in a month there will be an ocean where she used to be, and somewhere in Toronto there is a man who is about to marry a grave and lovely monument, and one morning, some ordinary Tuesday 10 years from now, she will show him the other picture, the true one, and he will finally meet his wife. Or she never shows a soul, and it lives in a drawer all her life, her one secret face. You will never know. The trade teaches you that too. You make the likeness, and the likeness sails on without you, and the rest of the story belongs to other people. That evening you take the hidden plate out from behind the loose board, from behind the acid bottles for the last time, and you scrub it, acid and rag, the way spoiled plates are scrubbed, because glass is money. The ghost of the laugh goes grey, then thin, then gone, and the glass squeaks clean under your thumbs, and next week it'll be somebody's grave face, a bride's or an alderman's or a dead man's, because in this house glass is never only one person for long. The laugh exists now in exactly one copy, in the lining of a muff going to sea. That is one more copy than the whole world had of it before you turn thief for a day, and you find you can live comfortably with the arithmetic. And on Saturday, in the ledger, in Mrs. Marlowe's beautiful copper plate, set neatly against your wages, sundries, paper and silver, 7 pence. Nothing said. Nothing ever said. That is how you learn that nothing behind the acid bottles was ever hidden at all, that the house has watched you be a thief and a fool and something better than both for a full year, and weighed it, and priced it at 7 pence. In this house, what is priced is forgiven. You pay the 7 pence like a man settling a debt of honour, and Mrs. Marlowe rules the line closed with her little brass rule, and that is the entire conversation, first word to last. March comes in with flags. Princess Alexandra of Denmark, 18 years old, is crossing the sea to marry the Prince of Wales. And London, which has been shut up in black for 15 months with its widowed queen, loses its head with a completeness you would not have believed if you were not standing in the middle of it. The Sea King's daughter, the papers call her, because the poet laureate has called her that. Tennyson's Welcome printed everywhere in the same week. Sea King's daughter from over the sea, and every printing press in the city is saying her name. Her carte de visite has been in the shop windows for weeks already, ordered from the photographers by the 100,000, the trade papers say, and you believe the trade papers, because you have watched the print sellers' boys carrying them through the streets in baskets like hot loaves. Cardamania has found its empress. A girl most of England has never seen is already propped on 10,000 parlour tables, and she has not yet set foot on the island. Triumphal arches go up along the route she will ride, timber and canvas and evergreen 60 feet high, with mottos on them in letters of gold. Stands are hammered together against the churchyard railings. Seats going at 2 guineas, 5 guineas, 10 for a balcony with luncheon carried in, and whole houses along the line let their windows the way farmers let fields. Regent Street dresses itself, flags out of every upper window, banners across the roadway. God bless the Prince of Wales worked in laurel over the drapers' fronts. And Mrs. Marlowe's book fills with a thing there is no precedent for in your year. Sittings booked ahead, weeks ahead, ladies wanting their likenesses taken in the gowns they will wear to see the procession, gentlemen wanting carts in their wedding day rosettes. Mr. Pole was right. You are not going to sleep in March. On Saturday the 7th of March she comes. The studio does not open. There is no pretending about it this time. No shilling day arithmetic. Not a sitter in England would climb 4 flights of stairs today, because today the whole city is a single event, and the event is a road. She lands at Gravesend in the morning, the guns telling the river telling the town, and she is to cross London in an open carriage, over London Bridge, through the city, along the Strand, up through Piccadilly to Paddington, and away to Windsor, and somewhere between 2 and 3 million human beings, they will say afterward, arrange themselves along that line to watch one girl go by. You and Davy are out by 8 with the house's blessing, and 2 of Mrs. Marlowe's sandwiches apiece. And by 9, Piccadilly is not a street any more. It is a substance. Costers and countesses' footmen, clerks on each other's shoulders, families with babies held up over the heads of the crowd like small flags, boys in the branches of every tree and boys on every lamp-post, and one boy magnificently on the crossbar of a scaffold with a paper of shrimps dining. You have been in London crowds for a year. You've never been in anything like this. And when I say you learn what 1 million people sound like, I need you to understand it is not shouting. Shouting is what 100 people do. 1 million people make weather, a deep, continuous, seamless roar that comes from nowhere and everywhere, that you feel through the pavement and in the bones of your chest before your ears have even agreed to it. The sound of everyone, and it rolls along the route from the east at walking pace, a tide of sound with a carriage somewhere under it, a quarter of an hour ahead of anything there is to see. Then the lifeguards, breastplates the only bright metal under the grey March sky, horses stepping sideways at the noise, then carriages, and then, in an open landau, small under the enormous roar, a girl in a white bonnet bowing to the left and to the right, left and right, steady as a metronome, with a face that is doing what every face you have photographed this year does, holding still, holding on. You are close enough for 4 seconds to see that she is very young and very tired, and being looked at by more human beings at once than have perhaps ever looked at one person in the history of the world, and then she is past at walking pace, gone toward Paddington and Windsor, and Davy, hoisted on the base of a railing with your shoulder for a backrest, reports the top of her bonnet for as long as it exists, and then says wonderingly, "She's littler than my sister." And 1 million people begin to try to go home all at once, and that alone takes until dark, and you and Davy are washed the last half-mile down Regent Street like sticks in a river, and Mrs. Marlowe feeds you soup and asks one question, which is whether the crowd was orderly, and files the answer somewhere behind her eyes with the appointments and the prices. The wedding itself is Tuesday, the 10th of March, at Windsor, in St. George's Chapel, and London takes a holiday whether anyone has granted it one or not. The shops shut. The bells go all morning. All Souls Flat clang in the middle of them. It rains, and nobody cares. 20 miles away, the papers will tell you. The prince in his garter robes waits at the altar, and the Sea King's daughter comes up the aisle in silk and Honiton lace. And high above the choir, in a small closed gallery box, Catherine of Aragon's closet, the Queen watches alone, in black, widow's black, in the middle of her son's wedding, above the singing, and she comes and goes by private stairs, and the crowds never see her at all. Grief in the gallery, marriage at the altar, one building holding both with the organ going. You think, that is this whole country in one sentence. That is the second reason still at work on the grandest day the rain has yet seen. And that night London lights itself on fire on purpose. The illuminations. Every public building, every club, every insurance office and newspaper office and draper's palace dresses itself in gas. Stars, crowns, Prince of Wales, feathers picked out in hundreds of little flames. The letters A and E burning 10 feet tall over shop fronts, and candles in 100,000 ordinary windows besides. And the whole town turns out after dark to walk and see, and the whole town flows east, because the city is said to be the finest of all, the bank and the mansion house dressed like palaces of light. At supper, Mr. Marlowe does not look up from his plate. If you must go, he says, keep west of Temple Bar. You must go. Of course you must go. You are 17, and the sky over London is glowing like a second sunset in the wrong place. And you and Davy go down the Strand with what feels like every soul in Middlesex, and it is wonderful. It is genuinely wonderful. Gaslight running up the fronts of the buildings in living gold, small children on shoulders everywhere with their faces lit like lanterns. And Fleet Street is thick but moving, and then you pass under Temple Bar, which is exactly where Mr. Marlowe told you to stop. And somewhere on Ludgate Hill in the minutes that follow the crowd changes state. It stops being a liquid and becomes a solid. It happens gradually and then all at once. First your arms are pressed to your sides, then your feet begin taking small steps you've not chosen, because the mass has a motion of its own and you are in it, not walking anymore, being carried, a chip in a slow current. The gaslight is glorious overhead, and down here there is a smell of crushed wool and hot breath, and the pressure comes in slow waves from somewhere far behind, where thousands of people who cannot see what is ahead are still cheerfully pushing toward it. Your chest learns to take its breath in sips between the waves. A woman somewhere to your left is saying quite quietly, I want to go back now. I want to go back. To nobody. To the crowd itself. And the crowd cannot hear her. Because the crowd is not a creature with ears. And Davy's hand arrives in yours like a much younger boy's, and his face, when you find it in the gaslight, has gone the colour of an unexposed plate. Thomas's craft comes to you then. Tavern night craft, crowd craft. Never fight the current, angle across it. You put your shoulder ahead of Davy and you work, not backward. Sideways. One shop front at a time, doorway to doorway. Using the stone of the buildings the way a waterman uses the slack water under the bank. And it takes what feels like an hour and is perhaps 8 minutes. And then a court opens off the hill, narrow, dark, blessedly half empty, and you're out of the current and standing in it, the two of you, breathing like men pulled out of the sea, listening to the huge bright roar go past the mouth of the alley. You do not try for the mansion house. You go home the back way. North through quiet streets where the illuminations are just a gold stain on the sky over the rooftops, and Davy's teeth chatter all down High Holborn, and it is not the cold, and you do not remark on it, and by the time you reach the attic he has talked himself back into an adventure, which is what 17 lets you do at 14. From the attic window before bed, you watch the glow over the city pulsing gently against the cloud like a false dawn, and under it, faint and continuous, the roar. The sound of everyone wanting to see. On the Thursday, the papers. 6 people were crushed to death in the city on the night of the illuminations, in the crowds near the mansion house, within half a mile of the alley that let you out. 6 come out to see the lights, like you, carried along like you, and then the current went against a wall instead of an alley, and the ones who fell could not get up, and the thousands behind never even knew. The paper gives it a quarter of a column between the descriptions of the fireworks and the lists of the mottos on the arches. London counts its dead the way Mrs. Marlowe counts sixpences, accurately and without stopping the day's business. At breakfast, Mr. Marlowe reads it, folds the paper once, and sets it down. Now you know why, he says to the teapot, to the table, to you, and then, in the same level breath, the bath wants filtering, the 9 o'clock is a bride, and that is the other thing the papers are full of, and it is your next fortnight, and it nearly takes the studio off its hinges. London, having roared itself hoarse, now wants its likeness taken. All of it, at once. Everyone who stood in that crowd wants to be photographed in what they wore to stand in it. Brides of the season come in their wedding clothes, because the whole country has weddings on the brain. Volunteers come in uniform. Children come dressed as sailors. The book runs solid from 9 to 4, 11 sittings a day, 12. And Davy learns to coat plates at a pace that would have frightened you both in January, and the printing frames stand in ranks at every window of the house, like little easels at a school of art, and Mrs. Marlowe's evening columns of figures grow so long she rules them in red, and within the fortnight the print sellers' windows have the wedding photographs from Windsor, and one of them stops you on the pavement like a hand on your chest. The bride and bridegroom stand in their wedding clothes, formal, grave, correct, and seated beside them is the Queen in her black, and she's not looking at the camera and she is not looking at them. She's looking at a marble bust of Prince Albert, her dead husband's stone face in the wedding photograph, and she gazes at it the way sitters gaze at the little mark on the column, and tens of thousands of that cart will sell, and nobody in this whole beflagged and illuminated country will find it strange. That is still the nation you are photographing. It's that recent. It's that real. It is in the middle of that roaring fortnight, on the second Thursday, that the headrest finally dies. A bride's mother, in grey watered silk, is in the iron. Davy wheels it, seats it, and wanting it sure, wanting it perfect, gives the cracked wing of the upper thumbscrew exactly the 1 hair past firm that you have warned him about twice. The wing strips. The clank is everything you always knew it would be, a dropped fire iron in a church, the top section falling its inch, and the lady comes up out of the chair with a cry, hand to her cap, plate spoiled at the count of 6, a guinea's goodwill teetering on the edge of the morning. Mr. Marlowe is all smoothness. These things occur, madam. The instrument has given long service and shall be pensioned this very day. A fresh plate at no charge, naturally. And might one say that the second attitude is in any case more becoming? The lady is soothed. The second plate is perfect. Davy, behind the camera, stands looking at his own hand as if it belongs to a stranger who has wronged him. And then Mr. Marlowe does the thing that tells you what a royal wedding is worth to this trade. He does not sigh over the thumbscrew. He does not look at the ledger. He sends you that same hour to the instrument makers in Rathbone Place for a new brass fitting. 3 shillings and 6pence, bright as church plate. And while the purse is open, standing at the counter, he writes a second order, and the second order is the blue glass. 11 shillings, ordered at last in the flood tide, because even Mr. Marlowe's caution answers to arithmetic, and the arithmetic this month has red-ruled columns. The pane comes on the Friday, crated in straw, and you carry up 4 flights like a sheet of April sky. And on the Sunday you and Davy putty it in together, your hands smelling of linseed, and the board and the brown paper come down after 15 weeks of blindness. And on the Monday morning Mr. Marlowe stands in the middle of the glasshouse with his watch open in his palm, reading a light that is whole for the first time in your entire service. No patch, no board, no crack screw, the new brass wing nut catching the sun. You are watching him from the door with the water cans, and something happens at the edge of his mouth, brief, involuntary, gone again inside the second, like a plate flashed too fast to fix. On any other man in England, you would have to call it a smile. 6 and 2, he says, snapping the watch shut, meaning the morning's exposures, meaning get the cans up, meaning the day now officially exists. But you saw it. You will never say so. You saw it. The wedding tide ebbs slowly through the end of March, the way all tides ebb, leaving the house richer and everyone in it 10 years more tired, and somewhere in the last week of the month, while you are pouring plates in the red gloom, a ship comes down the Mersey and stands out into the Irish Sea with its rails crowded, and on it somewhere is a draper's daughter with a monument in her trunk for a man in Toronto, and a laugh in the lining of her muff where the sea can't get at it, and you think of her exactly once that day, at the moment the light goes off the glass roof, and then the trade takes your hands back. April, and the letters come. The first is from your mother, who has had your winter letters read to her by the rector's wife and wants to know, in the rector's wife's careful hand, whether you are eating, whether you are keeping from low company, and whether the Queen, God comfort her, is as sad as they say. You write back that you are eating well, which is true, that you keep from low company, which is mostly true, and that the Queen is sadder than they say, which you know now with a strange precision, because you have seen the cart, and you do not explain that, because it would take a year to explain, because it took you a year to learn. The second letter has a Brighton postmark, and inside it there is no letter at all. There is a carte de visite, a photograph of a shop front on a sunny street, sharp as an etching, awnings out, and on the fascia above the window, in letters that even in an albumen print you can tell were gold, T-gauge, photographic artist. Leaning in the doorway, arms folded, small but unmistakable, wearing the expression of a man who has just won a long game of cards, is Thomas. On the back, in his terrible handwriting, 5 words, "You owe me 6pence. You laugh out loud," alone on the back landing, which startles Davy half off the stairs. And that evening you wrap a 6pence in a twist of blotting paper, the good blotting paper, and you post it to Brighton without one written word, because he'll understand, because there is no sentence you could add that the 6pence doesn't say better. Paid in full. Name in gold. That could be you, he used to say, nodding at other men's futures. It could still. Brighton light, sea light, some fascia somewhere with your own name on it. Some boy of your own carrying your cans and hating you gently at 6 in the morning. It could. but that's years away yet, and the bath wants filtering, and you find, testing the thought the way you'd test a knot, that you're in no hurry at all. There is more of this trade still to learn than you have learned, and this is the house that teaches it. With the wedding money and the winter's sixpences, a tin box under your mattress has grown heavy enough to do a thing you've been circling for months. 7 shillings and sixpence at a bootmaker's off Golden Square for the first pair of boots that have ever in your life been made no one's but yours. They fit like agreement. You walk back to the shop a half-inch taller and no blister anywhere in the world. And your father's Sunday boots, which walked you from the Norwich coach into this story, you clean and oil and wrap in sacking and set at the bottom of your box under the eaves. Not thrown away. Never thrown away. You don't throw away the boots that carried you here. You just stop needing them too. Mrs. Prideaux returns in mid-April with both daughters for what she calls a commemorative likeness, everyone being photographed this season, she understands, in honour of the royal event. She has read. She wishes it known that the Princess of Wales was photographed at a balustrade, and she trusts Mr. Marlowe keeps a balustrade. Mr. Marlowe, grave as a treaty, regrets the balustrade. The column he ventures is more classical. Mrs. Prideaux considers and decides that classical is precisely what she had in mind. The daughters, a year taller, hold their stillness like natives now, and when the headrest comes wheeling toward her on its iron foot, she does not so much as glance at it. Nobody does, the second time. That is its own small lesson in this trade. The first sitting in a life is an ordeal, the second is a habit, and the country is quietly, year by year, moving from the first kind to the second. One afternoon a parcel comes up from Suffolk with no letter in it. 2 shirts, plain, fine. The needlework of a woman who makes shirts for her bread and made these 2 like nobody's bread depended on it. One for you, one cut smaller, for a boy she has never met. Because word travels down a trade the way silver travels down a drain, invisibly, and arrives where it settles. Mrs. Marlowe looks at the work with the needlewoman's eye, is silent a moment, and enters nothing whatever in the ledger. You wear yours on Sundays. It fits like the boots. And once, on an April evening passing the darkroom door with the lamp in your hand, you see the shallow drawer at the end of the bench standing open, and Mr. Marlowe beside it, and his 2 fingers resting on the bald red velvet of the little case, light as breath. I'm here, and you go on up the stairs without a sound, carrying the knowing the way you have learned to carry a full tray, level, steady, spilling nothing. Nothing has changed since October. Everything has changed since October. Now you know her name. And so it comes around some quiet evening deep in April of 1863 that you sit at the back-room window after the shutters are up, with the street going dark below you, and realise it has been a year, near enough to the very night, since you first woke in that attic to the ether and the bells with the silver bath ringing its alarm in your chest. The lamplighter comes up the far side, lamp by lamp, gold now, not brown, spring air, clean. The last omnibus. Somewhere down the street a fiddle, badly played and entirely happy. Davy is upstairs, asleep already, flat on his back with his mouth open, in the exact attitude of Thomas before him, which must simply be what the attic does to its boys one after another forever. And if someone stopped you tonight on the dark stair, some traveller from a century you will never see, and asked you the question the whole future is going to ask, the question printed under every album page of stiff, solemn strangers, Why did no one smile? You could count the answers off for them on your black-stained fingers, one hand's worth, and none of them is the answer the future will assume, because a smile cannot be held. 8 seconds turns joy into rictus. Stillness is the only expression that survives being sustained, and calm the only feeling that can sit for its own portrait. Because half the country keeps its mouth shut over its teeth, and has trained its face since childhood in the closed lip arts, and no lens will untrain in a minute what living has drilled for 30 years. Because the whole nation has taken its key from a widow in a gallery box, and wears its gravity like good broadcloth, and holds that a serious face is not sorrow but self-respect. Because likeness costs a guinea the dozen, and most faces will be taken once in a lifetime, and a man does not grin at eternity. He stands for it. There's 3 centuries of painted ancestors stood for it, composed, upright, permanent. And because, the last reason, the one you had to carry a camera across London Bridge in the fog to learn, this trade keeps 1 foot in the churchyard. The same chair, the same lens, the same gentle hands that tilt a bride's chin closed a dead child's eyes the day before, and everyone who climbs those stairs knows it in their bones, if not in their thoughts. A portrait is not a moment here. It is a monument. It is the face that will outlast the face. They were not sad, the people in those photographs. You have heard them laughing on the stairs. You have watched a girl laugh so hard she broke the plate's heart, and then compose herself like a hand smoothing a counterpane. They simply believed the moment belonged to them, and the monument belonged to the ones who would be left behind. And they were making the monument. You do not yet know that it will not always be so. You do not know that in a handful of years men will perfect a dry plate that waits patiently in the dark with no countdown at all, that the seconds will shrink to a blink, that a day is coming when a camera will be a little box in anyone's hand, plates and chemistry all hidden inside, and photographs will fall from life like leaves, thousands upon thousands of them, cheap as breathing, and that on the day a likeness stops being once in a lifetime, the smile will walk into the photograph at last and make itself at home, and the grave faces of your century will be left behind on the album page for the future to misread as misery. You know none of this. You only know that the bath wants filtering tomorrow, and that the 9 o'clock is a christening party, and that the light this time of year comes up over the chimney pots like a friend. So you bank the fire, and you climb the stairs, attic stairs at the top, past the 2nd floor landing, quiet, and you set the candle on the shelf a full arm's reach from the coats, because the scorch on your cuff still says its one word and you still listen. Davy doesn't stir. You lie down on the straw mattress that fitted itself to you a year ago, and the ache settles into your shoulders the way it does, the honest ache, the ache that has paid for boots and a 6pence and a silk neckcloth and 2 shirts from Suffolk. The bells will pull you up at 6. The cans will be waiting, £30 each, 4 flights. The plate will remember everything, and the sitters will climb the stairs in their best clothes to stop time for 8 seconds, and not one of them will smile, and now you know all the reasons, and every one of them is a kind of love. But that's tomorrow. Right now, listen. The street is emptying. The last wheels die away toward Piccadilly, and a watchman's step goes down the far pavement, unhurried, and All Souls sends its flat, business-like clang across the rooftops for midnight, the same bell that rang you awake into your first morning of ether and terror, a year and a world ago, the same as that night, the same as tomorrow night, the same as all the nights stretching out ahead, in this attic and in every attic after it, You're warm enough. You're fed enough. You're safe enough. You have a trade in your hands and silver in your skin and boots that are nobody's but yours. That's more than the boy on the Norwich coach had. That's more than half the city can say tonight. That's enough. And centuries will pass. They will. The Regent Street you know will change past all recognition. The glass houses will vanish from the rooftops one by one when the light learns to live in a wire. The fog itself will be banished in time by laws not yet imagined. The wet plate will follow the daguerreotype into the museum cases, and the cameras will shrink and shrink until they slip into a waistcoat pocket, and then into places you have no words for, and people will carry 10,000 likenesses about with them and smile in every single one, and think nothing of it, and lose not one night's sleep over the miracle. Because that is what people do with miracles. You have seen it done with yours. But people will still climb stairs in their best clothes to be remembered. They will still stand a face in a frame on the parlour table and dust it on Sundays. They will still keep one particular picture in a drawer, or a muff lining, or a locked case with the velvet gone bald at the corners, and touch it sometimes. 2 fingers, light as breath. I'm here. And when someone they love is suddenly gone, the first thing they will reach for, in any century under any light, is the likeness, the one likeness, and they will hold it the way a mother in Suffolk holds a cart that was washed for a full hour so that it would never ever fade. Some things don't change. The reason for the picture doesn't change, and if somewhere near you tonight, in a frame or a book, or a small bright glass of your own, there is a photograph of a face you love, or a face you have lost, grave or laughing, then you already understand everything this year has been trying to teach, better than any album's caption ever could. That is all they were doing, those solemn strangers in sepia. That is all anyone was ever doing, holding still for the ones who would be left behind, making sure there would be a face. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took William Ansell in his attic above the silver and the glass on Regent Street a century and a half ago, with the watchman passing and the bells done ringing. Let the city sounds fade, his and yours together, the last wheels, the last footsteps, the long soft roar of everyone going quiet at last. Let the day put itself away like a plate slid into its groove, finished, fixed, safe in the dark. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. The plate remembers everything so you don't have to. Not tonight. Tomorrow there will be bells. Tomorrow there will be water to carry and light to read and faces. Always more faces climbing the stairs to be kept. Tomorrow can have all of it. But for now there's just this. The dark and the warmth and the slow tide going out. You've earned this rest. All year you've earned it. Take it and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.